Varun, for those who haven't come across you online, introduce yourself and tell our listeners what we're talking about today.
My name is Varun Goyal. I'm CEO and co-founder of Illuminate Health, and I'm an engineer by background, and I see myself as a patient innovator who's trying to elevate the role of pharmacists, and part and parcel of that is, of course, reimbursing them for the services they provide.
Varun, you first went for a computer engineering degree and then computer science. Well, then MBA too, but what are the differences between the computer engineering and computer science degrees?
The engineering gave me a great background from a hardware, software, really systems perspective.
Gotcha.
But then when I went out into the real world and started doing the kind of work I like to do, I realized I need to get some more computer science under my belt, if you will, more business applications and things like that. So that's why I went back for a computer science degree.
Give us a snapshot of the program.
We're trying to take more of a proactive approach to helping with medication management because, as you know, no one likes to take medications. No one likes to be sick. And so if you've got someone who truly reaches out to you proactively and provides that caring experience, that's really what people are looking for. There's a need for an ongoing medication management service so that there's no care gaps. We know when someone's going to be discharged from a hospital or has any kind of other service coming up, and then we can do what's called a medication reconciliation at the transition of care, apart from continuing that chronic disease management. So that's the program. The digital tools are only there as an enabler of that pharmacist delivering that care. So when you look at it from a business perspective, because only 12% of Americans have the health literacy needed to take their medications accurately on their own, there's a lot of non-optimized medication therapies, right? 50% of chronic disease patients are not taking their meds.
Our listeners, it's across the pharmacy industry, but let's say a good portion is pharmacy owners and / pharmacists. Pharmacy challenge over the last 20 years has been a move from product into knowledge. And in my opinion, the knowledge came even before the need. You've got people studying their tails off and getting the degrees and PharmDs and things like that, kind of pushing that need in a way like the cart before the horse. Like, we're going to get this knowledge and then we're going to get paid for it. And instead of having someone at the door ready to pay them to solve this problem, it kind of seems in reverse to me. So that's been our challenge. We can give a ton of care, but in the minds of consumers, they have more thought of us, and especially insurers, they have more thought of us as product versus paying for knowledge. We haven't cracked that nut. You being more of a knowledge company, has your vision been okay with that, or has that been a major hill to get over that has come to you?
Yeah.
Where does it all fit with your situation?
It's kind of really interesting the way you describe it, Mike, and it's right on. I mean, I think that every healthcare startup to some degree struggles with who pays for their service or their product. And to a large degree, what you said is exactly right. It's how we are trying to figure out, how do we get paid for the services we provide, which pharmacist led and tech enabled. And that's where journey, we've really come to the realization that it's really the payer. It's the health plans who are at risk for members ending up in the hospital due to an adverse event or due to non-adherence. It's the health plan who, if someone is not managing their heart condition properly, is going to deteriorate and end up costing them more over time. So that's kind of how we've come to the target from a business to business perspective. And that's the challenge that a community pharmacy has, or a pharmacy has, is they can impart knowledge, but how do they get paid for it? The good news is that some states have started recognizing pharmacists for their value in terms of the provider status, and they're able to bill for certain services, prescribe, and things like that. So we're headed in the right direction, but a lot more to happen from that perspective. And then there's the established collaborative practice agreements that the pharmacies can establish with maybe a doctor's office or hospital, and then provide collaborative care. So that's another model where people are trying to improve the outcomes of a member population, if you will. But absolutely. I mean, that's part and parcel of how do we sort of look at going to market, getting more traction, convincing health plans that the services, the interventions that a pharmacist provides have a lot of value. And again, the good news is there's a lot of great research now published around value that, let's say, an MTM consult provides, MTM being medication therapy management, or how having a pharmacist as part of your care team adds value in multiple ways, all impacting, like you said, not the product side of a physical medication, but really the downstream medical spend and the outcomes, the quality of care. So that's really our focus as well.
Sometimes it's better to come in from a different angle, like you guys are, even if it's putting lipstick on a pig, even if it's coming in with fancy technology from the other direction. It makes me think of PayPal. I never really liked PayPal. It's always kind of clunky. It's clunkier than a credit card. The other day I was looking at my phone and I had to Venmo one of my kids or something. Venmo is a PayPal company.
Right.
Same kind of thing, maybe not a lot better, but they kind of wipe the slate clean and bring in a new fresh start. That's why your guys' stuff with that fresh start on it might be the way to crack the industry.
That's an interesting perspective, Mike, in terms of looking at it as a fresh start for, pharmacies or pharmacists. I think maybe the challenge is where pharmacists were traditionally seen by a consumer, let's say even myself, right, was always at a store. And then even at the hospitals, in most cases, you're talking to a nurse. You're never seeing a pharmacist who's working at the inpatient pharmacy and so forth. So I think that's part of the challenge where they've always been sort of behind the scenes, if you will. And then I'll just qualify a bit in terms of us, Illuminate Health. We are a tech company. We're a tech-enabled services company. So at our heart, we are trying to enable pharmacists to deliver patient care. That's what we are trying to do. And so whether you look at us as an MTM platform, or you look at us as sort of a patient engagement and pharmacy care management company, I mean, that's positioning, right, in the marketplace. But really the value we're trying to bring is the value between the pharmacist and the patients they care for.
Every company needs money to run. Let's say that's going to be our top challenge of anybody listening to this. You don't have money, you're eventually gone. Once you say, okay, we have enough money, we've got this going, what's your next hurdle? Either negatively running away from it or positively trying to hit it? What's the next thought on your mind?
Yeah, great question. I think that, let's say, even if we did our fundraise, I think the challenges that would continue just for any other startup as well would be getting more adoption from a sales perspective. Because when you're selling to health plans, I mean, those sales cycles are just brutally long, right? I mean, you're lucky if you get a contract in 18 months of starting the first conversation. So I think that will continue to be a hurdle, but that's where if we raise money, we hire some really sharp people who can talk to the right people at health plans and help us get adoption, then that's the win. Right?
Yeah.
So that definitely will continue to be a challenge. I think that hiring the right people is always critical for organizations like ours. I mean, it's just a whole different mindset of the type of person you want to bring into a startup versus your standard corporate employee, if you will. And I'm sure it's the same for pharmacy owners or listening in. As a small business, you want to bring in the best of the best.
You want the best of the best. Plus, if you got 1,000 people and you made a bad hire, you don't really have to see Joe, just throw him on the other side of the building. But on a positive thing, you want the best. On a negative thing, you don't want to deal with some personality that you didn't pick up in the hiring process. Yeah. Now you got to deal with it because you're a minimum size team.
That's exactly right. The opportunity cost of a bad hire is tremendous, right? For a startup or a small business like a pharmacy. So I think that will continue to be something we'll continue to work on, is how do we attract the right people and just include the right people into the organization.
As you look back from your dream of this, where you want it to go, what has been the biggest realization? I'm always looking at the negative of things. I'm always thinking, I thought it was going to be easy and it's this. And the realization might be positive. It might be, well, we realize there's more need for us than we ever thought kind of thing. But what's the biggest change of heart, positive or negative, that you had from your thought of this to the reality of it?
So I think there's a couple of aspects to it. One, as sort of a professional and a personal journey, being out in the corporate world, coming to the startup world, it's definitely eye-opening that, you're it, right? The buck starts and stops with you. And so you're responsible for everything from the coffee machine to you name it. And so, for example, just the other day, I was diving into a lot of government paperwork, trying to figure out how do we work with government, right? I mean, things like this, you never have to worry about when you've got an army of people or, an organization all set up that way. I think the other aspect of it, honestly, has been the speed of execution, because and not in terms of, how long it takes to build up and how long it takes to get it to market and things like that. But it again comes down to the adoption. I think the interesting part is that in my mind, this should be an obvious thing for everybody out there taking multiple medications. But there's just, it's a process to try and get in front of the right people to present your case, and then to continue down the process of where you can actually impact the people you want to impact. So I think those are some of the sort of other realizations along the way. So that's kind of what I would share.
Part of the problem in all this stuff is you're up against human nature. I had a couple DVTs, blood clots over the years, and I'm taking a blood thinner. I'm supposed to take it every 12 hours. And you'd be surprised, I'm sitting in the other room watching YouTube or something on the TV, and I'm basically going to save my life over time by getting up and taking my blood thinner at night.
Right.
And you'd be surprised the excuses my mind comes up with to not come over in my duffel bag and get out the pill case and take it. It's amazing the stuff my mind comes up with, like, well, I don't really need that. It's like a 10-foot walk to get it,
Yeah.
And here am I with zero physical problems to get up and do this except being lazy. And it makes me think of people that have physical problems even get into the pharmacy and this and that. And I once heard that humans have a better rate of filling for their pets, a better compliance for the pets than compliance for themselves.
Absolutely. Yes. 100% agree. And it's the same thing with, say, would I fill a prescription for myself in a timely manner versus for my son? And same goes for a parent or a grandparent. So if I'm the one taking care of a loved one, I would refill a prescription or go get off from the sofa, get the medication, give it to them, as compared to if it was for myself. That's definitely the case. Completely agree. So a lot of it is behavior modification, right? That's the term being used out there, is how do you incentivize, how do you motivate people to get more active about self-care? Not just med management, but all aspects of self-care, whether it's taking a walk or getting enough sleep or checking your glucose on time, whatever it might be.
We saw with COVID, there was basically financial incentives, and there was like lotteries that you'd win $50,000 if you got your COVID shot and they picked your name or something like that. Talking about incentives, where do you come down on financially incentivizing people, maybe on your program through the healthcare thing? Some people will say it's a great thing, and someone else will say, well, if they're not excited enough and care enough about their own damn health, and screw them, we're not going to incentivize them. Do you see that as an option?
Yeah, so we will work with health plans or employers on creating that incentive program, because
money.
Yeah. I mean, and it could be as simple as, hey, you get a $0 copay on the next prescription, or you get an American Express gift card at the end of the 3 months, or whatever that incentive is. But, you're absolutely right. There's always going to be a segment of the population that, is proactive. So they're driven, they're organized, they're proactive about their care. And then there's the segment that is kind of more laid back. And like you said, maybe he's missing a dose or something because they're in front of the TV. And then there's the other population segment where, yeah, you can do anything and everything, but, it may or may not work, right? Just for whatever reason. And so I think from our perspective or plan or employer's perspective, it's about doing the right thing and trying, at least, in the hopes that even if you can't engage 100% of the people you're trying to engage, you can at least engage, 80.
Speaking about motivation, when you think of your worst emotion in running the business, on days you're challenged, whatever the challenge is, what emotion would you have to fight?
I think there's a couple of things here. I think in terms of emotions, I think anxiety or let's just call it fear come into play. It's fear of failing, and failing could be in multiple ways, right? Not delivering the service that you promised, or not being able to pay your team, whatever it might be. But that's where I think overcoming that on maybe a daily basis or monthly basis or whatever it is critical. Because as entrepreneurs, one has to be just infinitely optimistic all the time. And I think it's about being bold and courageous as part of this journey. So that's one aspect. I think the other aspect is really being super organized and really ensuring you are laser focused on exactly what needs to be done today or this week. Because otherwise, you could just spend all week in all kinds of activities for the sake of activity. And because, there's always just a lot to do. So I would say there's some of the things that I've definitely sort of worked on over time. Obviously, stress management is part and parcel of all of it, whether it's meditation or exercise or whatever works for you. Just being more structured again, so that you're including time for all of those activities, which at the end of the day will make you a better entrepreneur or CEO to make your company a success, while also balancing family or whatever else you might have.
You've got a partner, but let's say you had to have a new partner. What would be the top skill that you would want in somebody? Would you like someone that had a positive attitude? Would you like someone who's a go-getter? And you might fulfill that in your partnership, or maybe it doesn't need to be what you do. What would you look for in a partner?
Yeah, that's a tough one because really I need maybe 5 more partners
to bring the skills or the workload down.
Yeah, all of it, because
everything. Because
that goes back to our conversation about hiring for a small business or a startup. You need somebody who's got multiple skills, can wear multiple hats and interchange them on a daily basis, which is not easy to do. So I think all of what you said needs to be a go-getter. Obviously a positive demeanor and outlook on life and, the company and things like that. And just sharp and driven, because with startups, it's about figuring it out and getting it done. So that's really what you need. And then you can say, okay, yeah, I need help on the development side, or I need help on the technology side or clinical side. So that's kind of how I'd answer that.
Have you had to rely on your MBA training for any of this? Let's say that we took your MBA degree away. Would you have had enough experience or fortitude or learning on your own to do what you're doing, or do you think that truly helped?
I think it was instrumental in helping me get where I am.
And you went to Kellogg for your MBA.
Yeah, they have a great healthcare program. And that's what I focused my, MBA on is healthcare, and really understanding the dynamics of the stakeholders and the money, the flow of money, if you will, in healthcare. Because at the end of the day, it's a business. It's business of healthcare. So the MBA was absolutely wonderful. And it's not just the learnings from a textbook or classroom perspective, it's the relationships, right? It's knowing that I can pick up the phone and get advice from someone who also maybe went to Kellogg and just have that support. Because the entrepreneurial journey is just like raising kids. It takes a village. So it's about just having access to a group that's going to be supportive of what you're trying to achieve.
You've been here for like 5 years. Is that right?
Yeah, this is our 5th year. Yes.
Your 5th year. You said 10 years of healthcare. What were you doing in the 5 years before that?
Yeah, so looking at a company that is owned by health plans like Humana and Anthem in the world of claims management. So the way the money moves, right? How doctors get paid, hospitals get reimbursed and things like that, and how insurance companies process claims and do prior auths and so forth. So that's the world I came from.
What'd you do for them?
Kind of something similar, working on the next product idea, if you will, to managing existing business, different portfolios, let's say. So, I spent my time partly on the provider side, working with hospitals and clinics, and then partly on the health plan side. How do we use data?
Any of that sales?
Well, I guess there's always some level of sales, but yeah. Sales in terms of more the strategic aspect of talking to big, existing customers.
How are we going to move into this area kind of thing?
Yeah, that type thing, to, even potential customers. but really from a product and the roadmap perspective, strategy perspective, sometimes even implementation.
Did you have yourself in the position of a business owner / CEO at a certain point in your life and that pulled the problem out of you to solve and you're here? Or could your life have taken a bunch of different avenues?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I think I was really fortunate in finding my co-founder and have the opportunity to realize a dream of being an entrepreneur. Yes, was not planned per se. When I was 20 or 30, it just happened to all come together where I felt that I had the right mix, the technology background, the healthcare background to try and, do something here. And hopefully that's part of what maybe my co-founder thought, that yes, maybe we can do something here together. I think if I was to do this when I was 20, I don't think I would have been able to. Where back in the day, a couple of my college buddies and I did try our hand at a website building business, but life happened. And so I think the entrepreneurial bug remained, but yeah, this was not planned.
It wasn't planned, but if there was other versions of you all may have ended up in some role about like this. It might have been a different field or something. Do you think that leadership in you was waiting to come out?
Wow. That's a good question. I would hope so. But in all honesty, I think that's exactly right. I think if it was not entrepreneurship, someone like me would continue within a larger organization with entrepreneurship, trying to innovate from within and trying to have an impact that way. So I think doing it as part of a startup is great. But, there's several people trying to do it as part of large organizations as well.
As you're going through your weeks of being at your company, what is the worst 10% of your job? What thing do you wake up in the morning and say, crap, I got to do this?
I don't know if there's a worst part per se. I think it's just the volume of work where, let's say something simple as an extension on some paperwork, right, needs to happen. And the best person for it, because I have all the background and company information, whatever else is needed. But I know I've got to follow up on a sales opportunity, or I have an investor meeting coming up. It's always those conflicting priorities, like we talked about before, where I sit and think to myself, oh man, I wish I didn't have to do this or that so I could focus on this. So I think that's more of the scenario than a type of task, if you will. I think that's kind of been an interesting kind of realization over the course of time, is just playing multiple roles, if you will, is taxing, right? By the time I'm done with the day, I've had, let's say, financial conversations to technology to you name it. And I'm ready to go play with my kids or take a break, get a workout in and clear my head.
You mentioned filling out the forms. That is funny because I think of delegating and things like that, but it's a damn forms. When I got to fill a form out, it's like a lot of the stuff nobody else knows. It's just oddities. And then it's like you can have someone do that, but then you're just sitting there waiting for the question to come while they fill it out. So it's kind of an odd thing.
Yeah. And that's the art of management and delegations. It's figuring out, okay, what are the tasks or functions that you can actually delegate, assuming you find the right people for it, versus things that you just have to say, nope, it's easier if I just sit and do it.
You mentioned tasks. I imagine you've got a way to organize those. And what is that?
I have had the wonderful fortune of having this lady by the name of Caroline Abeleda join our team as my chief of staff. So that's been phenomenal in terms of improving organization, productivity, and things like that. But aside from that, I think it's about really just organizing yourself using tons of the tools available now, whether it's something simple, Excel or your Outlook calendar or whatever you like to use, to some of the newer tools out there with, I think, Monday and others. So I think really that's the name of the game is just being super organized and prioritizing.
You mentioned Monday.com.
Yeah.
2 years ago, they changed their name to Monday.com. They were Dapulse, DAPULSE.
Got it.
And the program was about the same. And they made the change over to Monday.com. And I thought it was a bad choice. I can see what they're trying to do, but here's the problem. And for our listeners, basically Monday.com it's like a calendar / do list sort of, and you can move things around graphically and stuff like that. It's team focused on a mission and so on. And the problem with it is you're naming a company something that's used in the conversations about it quite often, because the thing is called Monday. And it's kind of like, I don't know if you came across it. It's kind of like Abbott and Costello, like who's on first? Because you're like, we're going to do it on Monday, but I thought we were doing it Tuesday. No, we're doing it Tuesday, but put it on Monday for this and that. It was kind of a bad name. And the thing is like, there's other stuff that has common names, but when you have like an Apple computer, you're not talking about apples typically when you're talking about the computer. But with Monday, it was like,
yeah,
you're talking about it all the time. Varun, if you were not in healthcare, but you had your degrees, and someone said you had to be an entrepreneur now, but we're not going to let you continue in healthcare anymore, or in, in medical stuff like your current program, what would you be an entrepreneur in if it wasn't health right now?
That's an interesting one. I would say that it would have to be something to do with the environment and climate, where, I'd love to help figure out how do we decrease greenhouse gases, kind of deterioration of the planet, if you will. I think that would be interesting. It would definitely be technology related, whatever I did, entrepreneurship in. Thought about real estate in terms of, helping with people buying a house or selling a house and things like that. So yeah, those are a couple of quick ideas that come to mind.
The same question about not being able to do health. What if you couldn't do computers and someone said you have to get a degree, but you cannot do computers? Then what field would you be in?
Psychology.
Psychology?
Yep. I always thought understanding how the human mind works is so interesting. And I took a couple of psychology courses just as electives and just loved them. And I enjoyed writing. So kind of went hand in hand when it was time to write a term paper.
Talking about your program and the value that pharmacists can bring, there's a lot of different fields out there. When you look at your program, you talk about health, you talk about insurance. What other stakeholders or players are in your world you came up with of increasing patient care?
Yeah, great question. So I think one of the most crucial stakeholders, if you will, are the prescribers or the doctors, people who are writing the scripts that we are helping patients take accurately. I think there's a lot of value that, what we are trying to do with pharmacists goes back to the doctors. You think about a cardiologist who only has a certain amount of time with each patient during the consult. Wouldn't it be amazing if they had an up-to-date medication list on the patient, or if they had other information about potential side effects that the particular type of medication has on the patient, or any symptoms that the patient has been over the course of the 3 months since they last saw them. And then after that consult, if the pharmacist can reiterate or perform the medication education needed, on behalf of the doctor's office. Because unfortunately, they're always short-staffed, and so they don't have the time to spend with the patients. But if we can do this using the pharmacist-led service, now that's just a lot of value that goes back to helping improve the outcomes for those patients.
Where does this information all come from? Right now, for example, in a pharmacy, we don't really get a lot of information on the actual disease state of the person. And there's some drugs that can be used for a couple different things. You're never quite sure what it's for. Is this for depression or is it for sleep? And you're not quite sure. You could ask the person, but then it opens up a can of worms. Like, what do you mean I'm depressed kind of thing? I just can't get to sleep at night. Are there ways to collect this information?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as of now, the best source of data is the healthcare claims. So getting claims from the person's insurance company, where they have claims on the medical side as prescription side. So I know when did Mike go to a hospital or see a doctor? What prescriptions has Mike been picking up from the pharmacy, right? So that's the best source. The others, of course, are the doctor's EMR system, electronic medical record system, or the hospital's EMR. So, so ideal scenario is getting the claims along with the data from the EMR system so that you have the right mix of, like you said, the clinical context along with the claims piece.
Does that become a lot easier if you've sold to a healthcare system versus working with the patient? There's not like a national database to tap into, right? Once you get with the patient, then you're kind of getting a handshake, a computer handshake agreement with their systems.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So ideally, we work with a health plan that can provide us the data on the patient. And that way, even our first interaction with the patient or the member is not about, okay, let's enter all your information. We've got their information already preloaded. We're just verifying some of those aspects and then continue to deliver patient care. And same thing with, let's say, a hospital where we're able to pull information from a hospital system. It's about going through that interview process of, okay, let's take a look at, everything you're taking and what your experience has been. So that's where the data comes into play. Yeah. But I think to your point, that's where a lot of the tech companies are trying to do, whether it's Apple, it's Google, and they all want to provide that sort of personal and maybe be that registry nationally.
Do you see blockchain doing anything as far as your stuff is concerned, as far as data records, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so the application from a healthcare perspective for blockchain has been patient identification and record management, really, just given the security of its ledger-based. So we have not implemented blockchain as of now. We're focused more on AI, if you will, and machine learning as compared to blockchain. But yeah, it's definitely got its own applications for sure.
The blockchain's interesting with health records and things like that, because whenever they're talking about privacy, they'll talk about Facebook privacy and blockchain, all use for this. I'm like, I don't give a crap. If somebody wants to know more about me and they want to then sell me this or do me that, it's like, bring it on. I want more of this, but I can see if I was an employee somewhere.
Right.
And when I got layers of people, then I might not be so happy for someone to know about the last disease I had or my mental status or even like weight gain or something like that. It's like those things can have ramification if you're employed somewhere or you got a lot of pressure down from the top. I can see where that has a future, I suppose.
Absolutely. And I think that's where HIPAA and a lot of the cybersecurity regulation that's out there is so crucial because, to your point, I mean, it's about protecting privacy, making sure everyone's data is stored securely, transmitted securely, which also, going back to one of your previous questions of sort of a startup in healthcare, becomes an additional aspect of getting a startup off the ground. Because in healthcare, just like in finance, you've got a lot of regulatory things to work with.
When finally Illuminate gets as big as you could imagine it was going to be, are you comfortable being a CEO of that? Or are you saying, I kind of like this startup thing and goodbye, I'm going to go do this 10 years from now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've given that some thought. I've not come up with a definitive answer yet because a lot will go into that decision process depending on what stage of life and family and career and things like that. I would love to be involved with Illuminate as long as I can. And, even if it's not as CEO, I'm the first one to say, hey, Mike's the better guy for the job or whoever else than me, right? Because it's about success of Illuminate Health first.
Yeah. Well, Varun, it was great having you on the program. Anybody that is trying to get pharmacists into the system to help us improve the system is a friend of pharmacy. So thanks for what you're doing and keep it up.
I appreciate it, Mike. Yeah, I'm personally passionate about what pharmacists do and given my experience, just helping prevent others from going through the same thing. But really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thanks, Varun. We'll talk again.